We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we explore the art of songwriting, celebrate incredible artists and dive deep into the stories behind their music. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and as always, thank you for joining us. Our guest today on the podcast is Australian jazz funk collective Surprise Chef. The instrumental five-piece from Melbourne create absolutely sublime music that is both cinematic and vintage all at once, drawing on the textures of 1970s funk, soul and jazz to craft something that is wholly their own. With cosigns from the likes of Questlove and Jurassic 5's DJ Nu-Mark, and support from BBC Radio 6, KCRW, Double J and The Australian, just to name a few, the band have carved out a global following through their dynamic live shows and lush recordings. Now, in May of this year, the band released their fourth studio record, aptly titled Superb. It's another masterclass in groove-laden instrumental storytelling, elevating their already distinct sound while taking a more relaxed and exploratory approach to the songwriting process this time around. In today's episode, we are chatting with guitarist and songwriter Lachlan Stuckey about the creation of Superb. We talk about the shift towards a looser and more natural writing style and how that allowed the band to explore new musical territory. We also discuss their decision to record the album live to tape and how that impacted the overall energy and feel of this new record. We're also chatting about the challenge of translating such a richly layered record to the live stage, and Lachlan also shares some of the music currently inspiring him. Now, we want to thank Emily and Finn for their help with today's episode and remind everyone that Superb, the brand new album from Surprise Chef, is out right now. You'll find links in the show notes where you can stream or purchase the record, follow the band on their socials, and catch them on tour. While you're in the show notes, please be sure to follow us across all of our social media channels and subscribe to this very podcast. It is the best way to stay up to date with all of our upcoming guests. Now, let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Lachlan Stuckey from Surprise Chef. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Lachlan Stuckey from Surprise Chef. Lachlan, hello, sir. How are we?
Hi, it's a tremendous pleasure to be a part of this wonderful podcast. I'm here in the PBS studios here in Melbourne. They've very, very generously allowed me to sync up a place whilst we undertake what I can only imagine will be a delightful conversation.
Look, I very much appreciate your time. I appreciate the time of PBS for allowing us to kind of use their space while we're having a chat. It is a very exciting time for fans of the band and for yourself because there is a new Surprise Chef album out right now. It is called Superb. It is following its namesake in terms of being superb. Sorry for any shitty pun there. But congratulations on this album, mate. How are you and the guys feeling with the album out now?
Oh, thanks, buddy. We're feeling wonderful. I think, to be honest, we underestimated the feeling of immense gratification that comes with putting out a record and being able to experience everybody's reaction to it. It's been a minute since we put out an album, and it's just a wonderful remander of how great it can feel to have your tires pumped up by people telling you that they like the music that you make. We made this record towards the end of last year, so for us it's kind of a bit old news, which is always the way that it goes. But once it comes out, then you almost get to experience it from a different perspective as you see it through the lens of all the people who are hearing it for the first time.
100%. We've been speaking to a few artists lately about that weird thing that musicians kind of go through in terms of that you're creating this music, you're living, breathing it, and then it's almost like tools down for a number of months where you almost step back and then not forget, but it's then given a second life where you get to relive it again and go through it again. And I imagine that it must be kind of nice that second time round, because there's almost less pressure in terms of you're not really creating at that point. It's already been mixed and mastered. It's more so just like giving it to the universe.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I'd say so for sure. It's also cool hearing the things that people pick up on. You know, you have your own, very close perspective of the record and your own view of the music. But, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, as the expression goes. And it's great to get to experience the record in the context of, hearing what people gravitate to or the observations people make about the music that you hadn't considered.
Has there been any kind of review or any kind of perspective that you've heard that has been surprising or kind of you didn't expect from the record?
Well, we did actually watch this review that this teenage kid in America did. I don't know how. So Kong found it, our drummer. I don't know how he found it, but I can only assume he was, Googling Surprise Chef or something cringy like that. But there's this kid who has a YouTube channel where he reviews records, and he's only got 2 videos. One of them is like a video of him playing guitar that he uploaded like 2 years ago, and one of them is his sincere review of Superb. And the video has 16 views. And he does this 6-minute kind of, very thoughtful review of the album, in which he makes lots of wonderful observations. So I don't know. That's just one that springs to mind. Was a pretty enjoyable one to digest.
I imagine that, when you do put out an album, there's obviously reviews. There's that, I want to say traditional media or press, and I know that there's new media and everything else like that, but I imagine that it must be fun to kind of see certain things like that and view certain people's perspectives. And look, shout out to that YouTube creator and his, as long as it was a positive review, I want to double check.
Oh yeah, it was super positive. Yeah, it was very, very positive. But we can handle the negative ones too. I don't know if negative reviews really exist anymore. Obviously the arse fell out of the music media a while ago, to be replaced, with blogs and then social media. So, my mom often says well, when do you get the reviews? It's well, I don't know if there are going to be many reviews, and if they are, they're probably going to be pretty light. But I would like to think that if somebody had some sincere and very scathing observations to make, that we'd be up for hearing it.
Cool. Well, I'm going to use the next 20 minutes to no, just kidding.
Yeah, hell yeah, I can tell. I think we've been feeling really great about the response to this album, and I reckon we could do to come down a couple of pegs. Do your worst.
Not at all. That is not my position here today. I'm very glad to be talking about the record. I thought it was a lovely record. I thought it was gorgeous. So you won't be hearing any kind of negative critique from myself. I think that this record is it is a beautiful addition to the band's catalogue. I think that this time around it's sonically somewhat different, and I think that that's maybe, from what I understand, is how you guys approached it in terms of the making of this record was a little bit less focus on the what is the word I'm looking for? I guess the structure that had previously been put there, and having a bit more of a relaxed approach to recording this time round. Yeah,
couldn't put it better myself. We've been getting kind of increasingly zoomed in on the minutiae of the music, and whilst we do still believe that thinking a lot and thinking deeply about the music is necessary, we kind of wanted to apply to the process as a technique, overall, more of an emphasis on kind of spontaneity and kind of going with your first instinct and not second guessing it too much. We also wanted to apply something of a kind of maximalist approach to the tonal palette, which is something that we've been increasingly going in the opposite direction where, ever since the first Surprise Chef album, we've believed in creating a specific palette of sounds, and keeping that palette very considered and very concise. And, the result of that being that the albums have, a specific kind of tonal identity. And, just trying to do more with less, I suppose. Whereas on this record, we really just wanted to, to take the opposite approach and see what kind of outcome that would lead us to. And I think the outcome that it's led us to is just a more vibrant sounding album rather than, some of the records in the past, which are wonderful and excellent and delightful, don't get me wrong, but just don't have that same kind of tonal cacophony, which is a cool part about Superb, I think.
100%. I think it's something that I imagine must have been because I think there's a real power in being able to show restraint and having things that are kind of like very, particular and in a certain way. But I think there's also, especially for musicians who are as well versed as yourselves and perform in the way that you do, I imagine that there's also a power in being able to relax and being able to let go and being able to kind of explore those things without having that other little voice in the back of your mind kind of almost wanting to reel you back in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely wasn't, for as much as we wanted to make the record intuitive and the process intuitive, it was like reinventing the wheel in a way. Like it was trying to unlearn a lot of the habits that we've learned. Like, for example, we will generally, so we record live to tape. So there's no comping of parts or edits or, if the start of this take was good and the end of that take was good, then we'll just cut them up together. Or if the take felt good, but there's a little bass hit there that didn't really land, we could just nudge it on the computer or something. None of that's in play. So, the way that we want it to sound, we have to play it the way that we want it to sound. And often that means that we won't shy away from playing the tune 30 or 40 times until we feel like we've got the take where we execute it correctly. But naturally, once you've played a piece of music 30 or 40 times, there's a certain, it gets a little bit flattened out. There can be a certain energy or a certain life that gets tempered. We tend to find that, early on in the takes when you're just sort of learning the arrangement and getting to know the song, it might be a little bit more rough around the edges and there might be some acute execution deficiencies, but it has a certain spirit and that, people are kind of finding their parts and people are, things are still settling and that has a very particular feeling. But then as you iron it out and kind of hammer it and hammer it and hammer it, by the time you actually get the, immaculately executed take, then there may be something that you've lost. So we tried on Superb to be okay with the takes being more imperfect in the interest of preserving that spirit that you only get when the band's really just playing the arrangement for the first few times.
I think that there must be something within the magic of certain recordings, not just with Superb, but in recorded music in general, where sometimes you can hear those tiny little, maybe not imperfections, but little crackles, whatever it may be, that almost add to the chemistry of what is good within the recording and good within the music. And I think that kind of plays. I think there was I wanted to be a little bit self-indulgent in our conversation today. I wanted to chat about one of my favourite tracks on the record, which I think had this moment, nothing like of a technical standpoint incorrect, but there was like some kind of energy or crackle to it that I thought made it sound really, really romantic and vintage sounding almost in a way. And I know that that kind of phrase does get overused with certain bands. It was Dreamer's Disease, which is near the tail end of the record, very romantic kind of sounding, as I said. Wondering whether you might be able to give us some insight on where that track kind of came from, or like how it came to be on the record.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Dreamer's Disease. It's a lovely song. Something that we wanted to also bring into the process more on this record is, more people in the band bringing in ideas and having sort of more people's ideas sort of put at the forefront. When we first started the band, it was exclusively Jethro and myself writing all the material and kind of dictating it to the band. But then as we've, developed as a group and developed this kind of shared musical language and had a greater sense of what we're all doing together, then naturally it's become increasingly more collaborative. But on Superb, we specifically wanted to be like, we want everybody else to bring in songs. And, this is the first album that we have songs that were like, came from ideas that Kong, our drummer, brought in. Like, he'll always be contributing to ideas, but he's never really brought in like, hey, here's a song I wrote that I want to do. And Dreamer's Disease came from an idea that Carl, bass player, brought in. He kind of had these two sections, and it was actually initially a little bit more of a kind of like Phrygian mode, like Ethio jazz kind of thing. And then it had this little B section, these little B section chords. And in the end, we kind of chopped it up and put it back together and kind of got rid of what Carl had initially felt was kind of the main content of the idea, and really zoomed in on this little B section idea he had, these kind of chords. And then we sort of massaged that into the sort of more sentimental soul thing that it turned out to be. But yeah, I'd love to know exactly what that characteristic that you're referring to on that tune is. We did use this busted ass mellotron that one of the greatest living keys players, a man by the name of Simon Maven from Hiatus Coyote, lent us. Like, anyone knows how a mellotron works? It's like an early sampling keyboard that would have these tapes where you'd play the key and it would roll the tape and play the sample of the voice or the string sound or the bell or what have you. And this one's all busted and the tapes are kind of in the wrong order. So you think you're on the string sound and you're sort of playing a scale and it's like string, strings, random, reversed, gong, sample, string. And it's a super busted instrument, and we were trying to find a way to put it on the record, and it made its way onto that song Dreamer's Disease. I don't know if that's the thing that you might be hearing.
It might be. I might have to go back and really, really kind of focus on the different instrumentation of what it is and maybe see if it is that. I kind of love that though. Thank you for that insight, and thank you for sharing about the mellotron as well. I imagine every time it comes to a new record, and especially with the kind of music that the band makes, that it's kind of fun to be able to play around with some new instrumentation or new, I want to say almost new toys even. I think as technology gets better, but also there's this, there is communities as well that seem to take great care in looking after like vintage synths, vintage pads, vintage kind of instruments as well. I imagine that it must be a fun kind of thing to approach with a band like Surprise Chef, that you can work out where you want to play something or where you want to put something on a new record.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, sort of removing some of the restrictions on the instrumentation was a really cool thing in that respect on this record. We got a nice kind of selection of instruments of different descriptions in the studio now. And like I said previously, prior to commencing the recording of an album, we would have selected, these are the instruments that we will use. Whereas coming into the studio for Superb and knowing that just anything's available and, anything's fair game. And if, we could just use anything and everything. And we certainly did. There's all kinds of wonderful, strange instruments on that album.
How does that then translate to, I know that at the moment there's, I think there's been a few shows played in support of the record. I know that there's a few more in Australia. When people are listening to our chat, I think that you'll be kicking off your US tour around that time. How does that kind of translate when you've got all these instruments? One batch that I think are probably owned and loved by yourselves, but then with those extra little bits and pieces, how do you translate that into the live show for Surprise Chef?
Well, I suppose it's kind of tiered in its difficulty as far as our ability to realize the tracks live, in a concert setting. We're doing these shows in Melbourne in a couple of weeks, and it's very easy for us to communicate the music effectively in our hometown because we can bring all of the stuff that we used on the record to the venue, and we will be, we'll bring the timpani and we'll bring 2 vibraphones because there's 2 different vibraphones that sound very different on the record. We'll bring, the drum machine that's on websites. We'll bring, the kind of 6 keyboards that Jethro played. When we go interstate, it immediately gets a lot harder. We have to be thankful for 4 of the most beautiful words in the English language when used in concert with one another, and that is virgin musicians baggage allowance. The good people at Virgin Airlines, if you got an APRA account, you can get up to 4 pieces per traveler of luggage. So, 4 pieces, 5 members, you do the math. We can bring plenty of instruments doing that. When we go overseas, it gets harder still. We endeavor to, try to stay away from any kind of, if most of the instruments we use are mechanical instruments, not digital ones. Mm-hmm. Really try to avoid any use of digital instruments. However, sometimes it's unavoidable. For example, we've had the absolute great fortune of playing in cities like Delhi and Singapore and Beijing, and in some of these cities, it's very difficult to procure the specific kinds of old mechanical instruments that we use. So, once we start traveling, it gets more and more difficult to really be, expressing the tunes exactly as they are on the record, which is a shame. But sometimes you have to kind of make some compromises. It's sort of out of your hands. But I found actually, on Reddit a little while ago, someone had posted a picture of one of our shows in the States. I think it might have been San Diego. And, we're playing this like 300 cap room in San Diego, and they'd taken a picture of Jethro's keyboard setup, which is like an original Farfisa compact organ, Fender Rhodes, electric piano, a Sequential Circuits Prophet synth, an ARP Odyssey, and there was probably one more synth on there. And someone had posted it in a vintage synths subreddit. Mm-hmm. And all of the comments were just people being like, I can't believe they carry this shit around to shows. This is dumb. That stuff's going to break. Then they're not going to feel so clever when the Rhodes goes out of tune. And, once they grow up, they'll realize that all this shit just hurts your back and all that kind of stuff. But for us, playing the music live with those instruments is a really important part of, expressing the music and just, we enjoy playing the music when the sounds sound better. And the sound of an old Farfisa compact is incomparable to the sound of a Nord trying to do that. So for us, it's kind of worthwhile, in the situations that we can actually get those instruments happening.
100%. I think, well, as you said, it kind of shows the dedication to the craft of what you're doing and to being able to try and replicate as best as you can to those people who have come to see you and want to experience it as closely. You know, obviously there's an element of that they don't want to just see records played note for note exactly, but if you can recreate as much of it as you can, I think there's something really special in that. So there is a lot of dedication is obviously shown by the band. We've got to be making sure that all those live dates, wherever they are around the world, are put in today's podcast show notes. Curious for yourself, Lachlan, is there a track off Superb that you've found? Look, we don't play favourites, but that you're currently enjoying the most off the new record?
Oh yeah, for sure. The ones that I probably had less of a hand in the compositions are probably my favorite ones. I really like Sleep Dreams. Sleep Dreams was a tune, primarily composed by Hudson. Hudson has a really incredible ability to conceptualize an entire piece of music, prior to hearing it. I think Jethro and I write more in a way where we'll sketch out the chords, sketch out the melodies, have an idea for the arrangement. But then we want to hear the band play it, and we want to make some changes, and we want to do this and that, refine it. Whereas Hudson can just kind of hear the whole thing in his head, write it all out, and then it'd be awesome. And Sleep Dreams, he's not dictatorial. It wasn't like he came in being like, "Here's the tune, no one change anything." But he brought it in and it was just like, "This is killer, top to bottom. This is great. No notes. This is awesome." I really, really like that one. That also is the first tune we've ever recorded that has Jethro playing flute on it, which is really nice. He taught himself how to play flute.
Sick.
I really like Fair Vader, which was my tune. I really like that. I think that's killer. I reckon I'm really pleased with that tune, how it turned out. And I also really dig Body Slam. That's another Hudson joint too. That turned out real kooky.
Nice. Look, some absolutely solid choices there. I think some of the people I've spoken to have their own favourites, and so I think it's one of those things where at the moment everyone's got their own little favourite little piece of the pie, which I think kind of is the merits of a long-standing record, if that makes sense, an album that has some good legs to it, which I think people are going to continue to find and appreciate and learn more as these coming months go on. Lachlan, I was wondering, what we usually do to wrap things up is ask, I guess, what they're currently listening to for yourself. Is there anything that's on high rotation at the moment?
Oh, okay, this is a really good question. So I, along with Jethro from Surprise Chef, I run a label called College of Knowledge, which primarily releases, music from our community. I say the band's kind of surrounding Surprise Chef, but only that's because might be the point of reference for people listening. Hudson has a bunch of great bands that he's in, the Proteins, Ruddy Boogaloo, Brenda. The list kind of goes on, but we have a bunch of incredible records that we're currently scheduling for release through the label, and I'm mainly listening to those albums. So Hudson has an album by his band Brenda that we all played on. That'll be, I believe, announced when people will be hearing this. Henry Jenkins, who records and mixes, produces all the Surprise Chef music. It's absolute paragon engineer, great, crucial, important musical collaborator for Surprise Chef. Has an album of his music that's going to be coming out. There's a group called Let Your Hair Down that Hudson and I play in that has another album that's going to come out next year. It's just really a lot of stuff. Liam McGorry, great trumpet player here in Melbourne, has a record we all played on that's going to get announced. Listening to a lot of this unreleased stuff that we're going to be putting out that we're all really excited about. But outside of that, I love Brain Story, a band from the Inland Empire in California, who are also on Big Crown, our label in New York. Lady Ray has new music, which is really, really dope. We work with a singer here in Melbourne called Ella Thompson. She's writing new music. She's amazing. Love listening to her stuff. Really dig, always listen to dusty old music, lots of lots of like dancehall from the 80s and rocksteady and roots reggae, Jamaican music from the late 60s and 70s. Recently got a real nice copy of the first Carlton and the Shoes album, which is one of the great rocksteady albums from 1968. Gee whiz. Man, I listen to a lot of podcasts, to be honest. Listen to the Global News podcast on a high rotation. That's probably what I'm listening to most of, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Fair, very fair. I think there's quite a bit of an eclectic taste there, and also quite a bit that's keeping you busy as well, Lachlan. I think that it sounds like there's plenty in the pipeline for both yourself and the other members of the band, but very excited to kind of we'll try and put a link somewhere in today's show notes as well for a number of those artists so that they can kind of keep up to date with a number of those releases when they are announced and when they do come out. But yeah, it sounds like there's quite a bit of music going on in that for yourself.
You got to make hay while the sun shines, and right now the sun is shining, which is to say that we're surrounded by a really, really beautiful, tight-knit group of musicians who are all extremely active, extremely motivated. The creative spirit feels very, very much alive, with us in our bodies at the moment. So whilst that's kind of burning, then we'll try to keep making records and making the most of it.
I absolutely love that. Well, looking forward to seeing a number of those releases and whatever comes from that kind of ethos of, as you said, making hay while the sun shines. But for the time being, we're still going to be enjoying this new Surprise Chef record. It is called Superb. It's out now. There'll be links in the show notes for people to buy the record, catch you on tour, follow you on socials, all that fun stuff that people have to do these days. But Lachlan, I appreciate you coming to have a chat with us on the podcast. It's been a lovely time.
Thanks, Simon. It has indeed been a lovely time, and that is a testament to your professionalism and good nature.